then rock has spoken out. Now must a wicked mind, planner of things I dare not speak, and of this bloody rack, pray for feet that run as fast as the four hoofs of the wind, cloudy Parnassus and the fates thunder at his back. That sacred crossing place of lines upon Parnassus' head, lines drawn to north and south and drawn to west and east.
In the theater of ancient Greece, actors wore masks to portray the superhuman heroes of legend. These actors are telling the ancient tragic tale of Oedipus, king of Thebes. Oedipus was the proud ruler of a happy land, until the day he learned that, unknowingly, he had murdered his own father, King Laius, and married his own mother. And for these acts, Oedipus suffered horribly the wrath of the gods.
Now, lady, I will tell you the truth. When I had come close up to those 3 roads, I came upon a herald, and a man like him you have described seated in a carriage. The man who held the reins, and the old man himself, would not give me room, but thought to force me from the path. I struck the driver in my anger. The old man, seeing what I had done, waited till I was passing, then struck me a blow upon the head. I paid him back in full, for I knocked him out of the carriage with a blow of my stick. He rolled upon his back, and after that, I killed them all! If this man were indeed Laius, is there a more miserable man in the world than the man before you now? Is there a man more hated of heaven? No stranger, no citizen may receive him into his house, not a soul may speak to him, and no mouth but my own mouth has laid this curse upon me. Am I not wretched? May I be swept from this world before I have endured this doom.
The Greek legend of Oedipus is thousands of years old. But it may symbolize an eternal human conflict. Today, the Oedipus complex is part of the psychoanalytic theory of personality. Psychoanalysts say that every little boy feels a sexual attraction to his mother, and every little girl to her father. The other parent is a rival to be eliminated. Deep in the child's unconscious mind, the crimes of Oedipus are repeated in wishful fantasy. Fortunately, that wish remains a wish. Psychoanalysts say that children find new attachments as they mature. But why is the ancient tale of Oedipus still used to help explain the human personality? Even today, no one knows exactly what the personality is. We think it's something in the mind which makes human beings behave the way they do. Does personality contain innate structures and predictable patterns of behavior? Or is each of us unpredictable and unique? A theory of personality should answer this question one way or the other. That's a pretty tough job, but it's never stopped people from trying. Since the beginning, theories have been efforts to name the unnamed, to order the chaotic, to ensure survival. The earliest civilizations theorized about everything under and over and all around the sun. They wanted desperately to control the natural cycles which meant success or failure for their crops, and life or death for their peoples. Ancient civilizations also pondered the universe within the human mind. One of the earliest personality theories held that the same cosmic powers which controlled the seasons and the tides also controlled behavior. Over thousands of years, astrology developed 12 main personality types, each reflecting the eternal motions of the planets. And even today, astrology has millions of faithful followers. ancient peoples turned their observations about the personality into myths. Myths, like the Oedipus story, were an early method of explaining behavior with gods and mighty heroes. They symbolized individual human qualities like love, violence, and wisdom. These immortals ruled all the actions of humanity. And just like humans, they married, schemed, and fought with one another. In mythical heavens and hells, they played out all the conflicts that exist within the human mind. But even in the age of myth, another system arose among the Greeks. Philosophers began to explain the personality without the gods and heroes. Plato compared the personality to a chariot whose driver was reason. Reason guided two horses, spiritual emotion and physical emotion, and maintained a balanced personality. But Plato admitted that every individual was different. The horses of emotion were frequently stronger than their reasoning driver. Not long after Plato, philosophers in India came up with a completely different theory of personality. They taught that the human being has conscious and unconscious aspects, which have little to do with each other. And they claimed that the unconscious part was by far the more powerful influence on behavior. Does any of that sound familiar? Well, it might, because this ancient Indian theory anticipated the work of Western psychology's most famous personality theorist, the man who revolutionized our thinking about ourselves. That revolutionary was Viennese physician Sigmund Freud. In 1885, Freud was a medical researcher, professionally respected, but unknown outside academic circles. By 1905, he was a worldwide celebrity and the center of a violent controversy over his rather shocking assertions about human behavior and misbehavior. In these consulting rooms, Freud saw patients suffering from illnesses which had no medical cause. No one could explain these illnesses, and no one could cure them. So Freud tried some new techniques, including hypnosis. He discovered that his patients improved if they relived some painful moment from their past. So he encouraged them to do so. What they revealed was rather disturbing to 19th century Vienna. Time and time again, they dredged up memories of early sexual desire, repressed by their parents' middle-class morality. To Freud, it was clear that repressed sexuality was the cause of his patients' problems. Victorian Europe didn't want to hear anything about sex. But Freud insisted on the validity of his observations, and he asked more questions. If people repressed socially unacceptable thoughts from their conscious minds, where did these thoughts go? Freud decided to find out.
One summer's day in 1900, before he'd become famous, Sigmund Freud was casually chatting with a young acquaintance. His friend was in a bitter and pessimistic mood. He vented his anger against the world by quoting a line of Latin poetry, but he left out one word. And Freud reminded him of the forgotten word, and then asked him to reveal any thoughts he associated with it. In less than 5 minutes of this mental pre-associating, Freud had correctly guessed that his young friend's anger was really the fear that his girlfriend might be pregnant. Well, today that young man's memory lapse would be called a Freudian slip. Freud believed that we repress memories rather than forget them, and he developed techniques for uncovering those memories. Eventually, he presented these techniques as the new science
of psychoanalysis, a new theory of personality. Freud's theory was based on the concept of an unconscious mind. According to Freud, the unconscious was the home of all the repressed wishes, fantasies, and fears too painful for admission to the conscious mind. But verbal slip-ups, like those of Freud's friend, showed that the dark thoughts of the unconscious were a powerful influence on all behavior. Perhaps the unconscious was even more powerful than conscious reason. Freud believed that the interaction of the conscious and unconscious minds was the source of our daily behavior. This interaction may be more a conflict than cooperation. Take, for example, the simple act of getting up each morning. The unconscious would prefer to stay in bed, but the conscious mind won't let it. The conscious mind overpowers the unconscious and pushes us into another busy day. To explain this conflict, Freud identified three permanent aspects of adult personality. The unconscious personality he called the id, from the Latin word for it. The id expressed raw psychic energy, called libido, a primitive, infantile drive to satisfy hunger, comfort, and sex. The conscious mind learns the behavioral standards of family and society. These standards become a part of the personality Freud called the superego. The superego tells the ego, the person's reasoning intellect, what to do. The trouble is, so does the id. From its stronghold in the unconscious, the id rushes forth, demanding instant gratification of every urge. At the same time, the superego commands the ego to push the id back into the unconscious. The complete human personality is the interaction of all three. But like a balance of political powers, the arrangement is seldom peaceful. That interaction creates an inner tension which Freud called anxiety. If the id, ego, and superego fail to work things out, the anxiety level becomes unbearable, and a person may not be able to function normally. Fortunately, the ego has some powerful tools at its disposal. Freud called them defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms work unconsciously to defend the personality against anxiety. Here are some of them, all ingeniously designed to save us from unbearable reality. You just might recognize a few. Rationalization. You didn't really want it anyway.
Hi. I just flunked my English final. Well, you know, I've been thinking, and it's not really that important. I mean, we all speak English anyhow, right? Besides, it was really a poor test. I mean, the questions were ambiguous. Well, I take that back, they were stupid.
Projection of your wishes on others.
See that girl over there with the long brown hair? Yeah, she's got just a little tiny mole right underneath her left eye. Well, she's been staring at me all night long. She digs me.
Identification with those greater than yourself.
Come on, you guys, start playing football. Quit horsing around.
Harry, do you realize you're talking to the television set again? Do you remember when we discussed this? Normal people do not talk to the television set.
I just happen to like football.
Like football? Harry, you love football. You should have married Howard Cosell.
That is ridiculous.
One at the 8, one is up to the 10, Lynch one at the 15, up to the 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, down to the 40, 35, 30, 20, 15, 10, 5, Lynch, 1, scores, 92 yards!
We won. We won. We won!
Freud's successors continue to believe that his basic theory is valid, but they also believe that it puts too much emphasis on the conflict between id, ego, and superego. Most contemporary psychoanalysts take a more positive approach. They stress that the personality can develop a normal, healthy integration. And they emphasize that personality develops for other reasons, not just the sex drive. A leader in this work is Erik Erikson, a contemporary American psychologist. Erikson's theory isn't psychosexual, but psychosocial. It gives culture, not sex, the major role in developing the personality. The world outside the mind, our culture, with its wide variety of influences, is more important to Erikson than internal biological drives. And unlike Freud, who declared the personality fully formed by the time of puberty, Erikson extends its development into a lifelong process. He believes that between birth and death, every person must pass through 8 stages of personality formation, and each stage presents a problem to be solved. The first stage of personality formation is during life's first year. The problem is trust. Infants must learn to trust the world, and they will if their needs are met and they feel loved. If they don't, mistrust will be their dominant attitude in life. Stage 2 occupies the second and third years. Children are now physically active and can do a lot for themselves. If they can exercise their new abilities, they gain a feeling of personal freedom or autonomy. But if their parents forbid them or do everything for them, they will learn to doubt themselves. The third stage is the stage of initiative. At age 4 or 5, children can do many new things and have mastered language. They're curious about the world around them. If their parents and others encourage this curiosity, their personalities will develop the power of initiative. But if parents ignore or suppress curiosity, initiative will be replaced by guilt. When children enter school, they enter the long 4th stage, which lasts several years. School is a whole new world. Children must learn to work and play with others within a framework of rules. They have new responsibilities, like homework. If they meet these challenges successfully and are rewarded, they add the quality of industriousness to their personalities. If they fail and are censured, they feel inferior instead. Stage 5 arrives with the great upheaval of puberty. Suddenly, a lot is happening. From 12 to 18, the body changes rapidly, and the mind matures. We begin to think about what other people think, especially what they think about us. If adolescents come through the first 4 stages successfully, they can use their growing awareness of self and others to construct their personal identity, an identity that places them in society in the way that's best for them. But if they can't construct an identity, they will suffer role confusion. They won't know where to go or what to do. They will wander through life, searching for something they can never quite seem to find. When adolescence gives way to adulthood, the new grown-up enters a 6th stage and faces a new challenge, the problem of intimacy. For Erikson, intimacy is much more than sexual. It means the ability to share life with others without losing one's own identity. If they can do this, young adults will move into the world, find mates, and establish lives together. If they can't, they bury their real feelings and fall into isolation, with only shallow friendships to sustain them. The tasks of adult life carry us forward into middle age, where we reach a seventh stage. At this age, people begin to look beyond themselves and become concerned about contributing to the welfare of the world. They feel a responsibility to use their experience to guide the next generation. If they realize these feelings, they achieve a creative, productive, helping way of life. But if they don't, they sink into a bitter, negative self-absorption. Old age brings us to the eighth and final stage of our development. We look back over the life we have lived. Erickson says that this backward glance can bring peace of mind and a sense of integrity if what we see pleases us, if we're satisfied that we've done the best we could. But if we see only a succession of failures, we may feel that our time has simply run out and sink into a final despair. Erickson doesn't believe that failure at any stage is irreversible. If we succeed later in life, we may undo the damage done in youth. And he doesn't believe that we either succeed or fail at each stage. He thinks the healthiest people do both.
It happens so easily that when this is crowded, people take away mistrust, doubt, shame, and all of these things, and think I'm merely establishing an achievement scale. First, you must have trust. Mistrust is the ratio of trust and mistrust is our basic social attitude. We do this constantly. If we walk, if we enter somewhere, we have to differentiate now. Can we trust or mistrust? And mistrust meaning the recognition of danger, the anticipation of discomfort, and so on. So these are two things, is very basic to the whole scheme.
Erickson differs from Freud in one more very important way. Freud told his patients that their fates were sealed, that they had to live with their personalities as best they could. Erickson's theory always holds open the possibility of change and hope.
To me, hope is a very basic human strength without which we couldn't be alive.
Even Erickson's respect for hope and change isn't enough for some people today. Today, they look at history and the world around them, and they see that people are as enigmatic as ever. The paradoxes of human behavior seem to defy any final explanation of their source. In recent years, some have gone beyond Erickson and Freud by declaring that any single explanation of personality is false. They've started another revolution in personality theory, one that begins with the question, why have a theory at all?
I don't like the pigeonholes that Freudian theory has developed into, and other theories too. I think people handicap their thinking when they think in terms of so many labels. I'd rather they observe the phenomena itself.
Carl Rogers helped start the revolution against pigeonholing the personality. His theory begins and ends with the uniqueness of the individual human being. This revolution is called humanism. Humanism recognizes the human capacity for individual growth at every stage of life. It imposes no structures or limits on what Rogers defines as the self.
Self includes all of the perceptions the individual has of his organism, of his experience, and the way in which those perceptions are related to others in his environment, to objects in his environment, to the whole exterior world.
Humanists don't believe that biological or cultural forces shape the personality. They do believe that the personality shapes the world through its own perception. We can perceive the world in any number of ways, right or wrong. We are free agents who interpret experience in ways that express our inborn tendency to realize our potential in life. Humanists call this process self-actualization. Abraham Maslow, another prominent humanist, proposed a universal hierarchy of human needs. Basic needs are the physiological needs for food, drink, sex, and security. By meeting them, we survive and satisfy ourselves physically and socially. But, said Maslow, basic needs are only part of life. As we satisfy them, we begin to feel something new, the drive of inborn higher needs, like the need to love others, the need for self-esteem, and the need to actualize one's self in life. Like every humanist, he believes that we have an innate tendency to grow, to push ourselves beyond what we have already done. The personality develops through meeting our needs. Growth may lead to the transcendence of our own personality, a self-forgetting merger with the universe around us. Self-transcendence sounds rather esoteric, and indeed it can be. But Maslow saw it happening to everyone whose powerful involvement in life led to a peak experience, a moment of ecstasy that transported them out of themselves. And, strange to say, people who have had peak experiences say that at the moment of self-transcendence, they've never felt more truly at one with themselves.
Maslow, Rogers, Erickson, Freud, who's right? Personality theories lead to techniques to help mentally ill people, and they also help others gain valuable insights into who they are. There may never be one theory that solves the riddle of the personality, but psychologists can do a great deal for you and me just by searching for a theory.
Manner of things I dare not speak, and of this bloody rack. Pray for feet that run as fast as the four hoofs of the wind, cloudy Parnassus and the fates thunder at his back. That sacred crossing place of lines upon Parnassus' head, lines drawn through north and south and drawn through west and east. That navel of the world makes all men search the mountain wood, the solitary cavern of man. Manner of things I dare not speak, and of this bloody rack. Pray for feet that run as fast as the four hoofs of the wind, cloudy Parnassus and the fates thunder at his back. Pray for feet that run as fast as the four hoofs of lines upon Parnassus' head, lines drawn through north and south and drawn through west and east. Crossing place of that navel of the world makes all men search the mountain wood, the solitary cavern of man. That navel of the world crossing place of lines upon Parnassus' head, lines drawn through north and south and drawn through west and east. That navel of the world makes all men.